Hi, I'm Sean.
I'm Rhonda.
Let's talk about managing money in your marriage.
So, in this video, we want to talk about getting ready to budget, and in an upcoming video, we want to talk about the nitty gritty of budgeting.
Foundationally, we need to first be able to communicate well as a married couple to be able to talk about money.
There's got to be a certain amount of unity already in the relationship if you're going to be able to have this kind of discussion.
Right. We need to have a trust in God and not in money itself.
We need to be able to find contentment with where we are and what we have. Philippians 4:11 through 12, it says, I've learned in whatever state I am, therewith to be content. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things, I'm instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need.
We definitely need to have our trust in God to provide everything that we have need of and not in the money itself.
So we want to be able to deal with our triggers, our baggage. What if we have fears? What if we have unmet expectations?
Or maybe there's addictions or gambling, things that can be putting holes in your pocket and you could be losing.
So there's some things that would need to be addressed beforehand, like these things, to make a foundation from which we would even be able to budget.
Our ability to communicate well is so important in this. We need to have a humble attitude in being able to share well and to listen well.
We need to be approachable so that our spouse is able to come to us with any problems they might see about budgeting.
And we actually need to have an interest in our spouse's perspective that may be different than ours.
Now, there's a novel idea.
We need to have a flexibility to be able to adjust to our spouse.
In 1 Corinthians 13, we have the love chapter. Galatians 5:22 through 23, there's the fruit of the Spirit. When we're budgeting, this is an amazing opportunity to grow in these areas.
And realize this is a covenant relationship. You aren't two strangers sharing a house. You're actually in a relationship together and you have an obligation to each other.
You have two people, two perspectives when you're working on a budget.
And neither one of us need to be invalidating the different perspective of our spouse.
You know, you're not a single person anymore. So deciding how the money's going to be spent has to be a united effort.
Look at 1 Corinthians 7, where it talks about what you owe in obligation to your spouse, and this definitely is going to be giving of yourself to your spouse in this area.
You know, if we're withholding ourselves, we may withhold money. And we have to be able to give everything when we're talking about covenant.
Sometimes there can be a head of the house mentality where, I'm the one who brings home the bacon, therefore I'm the one who decides how the money is managed.
Wow. And that's difficult, especially for stay-at-home moms. They're carrying the unpaid part of the relationship. And they're partners too and should have a say in the way the money goes.
You can have both spouses working and one spouse brings home more money than the other one. That doesn't mean that one calls more of the shots than the other one.
We hear so many reasons why one spouse believes they have more of a say about money than the other, and it should be a partnership where we're sharing power instead of having power struggles.
It needs to be our way and our money, not my way and my money.
Nobody gets married to become a child or a puppet or to be owned by another person and become invisible. We want to be seen, and that includes being an equal part of the budgeting.
And that I'm able to receive influence from my spouse about this.
Problems when we have lack of partnership in a marriage, you might have someone controlling another person, someone dominating the other.
We could have this right versus wrong mentality. I'm right, it should be my way, or this black and white kind of way of seeing things.
We might get into spending wars. Well, you spent this money, so I ought to be able to spend this money.
Money management in the marriage is going to be a we mentality, not a me mentality.
And really, when we talk about the way we handle money, it's an expression of the extent to which we are one and not two.
It's not so much about the quantity of money, it's more about your agreement about what you do have.
It's so important to value your spouse's perspective. If you really believe God made one out of two, then you have to see that both are equally important.
We need to have shared values and expectations. We need to be able to be in agreement about each other's goals and dreams.
You know, one person may be a spender and the other person may be a saver, and those can look like opposites, but they're actually complementary, and we
They
have
are.
to be able to work together.
It brings
on
a
those.
balance.
It does.
You know, one spouse may see that we need this for the home or the children need this, and both spouses need to value the perspective of the other one in this area.
Instead of diminishing or invalidating that need, because I don't see it as a need.
One may be more inclined to spend for entertainment or pricey foods or eating out, and we need to understand how to balance each other in these areas.
Right. You know, budgeting has a lot to do with trust and transparency as well.
We don't need to hide things. We don't need to, I don't want my spouse to know that I spent money in this area. We need to have agreement with our spouse on that.
There needs to be equal access to the money. It's our money, not mine or yours.
You know, sometimes there's been a betrayal of trust in this area, and trust needs to be restored around money in the marriage.
You know, 1 Corinthians 7, it talks about getting consent to pull away from the marriage to spend more time with God. If you have to have consent for that, surely you would also need consent for the way you would spend money. Anytime you are using something that is there should be consent around that.
And we definitely need to deal with lack of trust that may be centered around problems that have come up with mismanagement of money in the past.
And so we don't want to be independent, where we're withholding ourselves from each other. Can you see there are so many things that may need to be worked on before we really could come up with a good budget? But it's important that we come up with a budget together because we're married. And so we need to be able to work through and be able to talk about these things.
This is an exciting journey as you learn to manage money well in your marriage.